Hello everyone, this is Srini Pai from Acceldata Customer Success. In today's topic, we will discuss about integrating Azure Microsoft SQL Server as a data source in ADOC. The agenda of today's call is as below. We'll start with an overview on Azure Microsoft SQL data source. Then we'll discuss about the various data source configuration prerequisites that are needed for configuring the data source for Azure Microsoft SQL Server. We'll then follow it up with a quick demo on configuring the Azure Microsoft SQL Server data source in ADOC. We'll end the discussion by discussing the common FAQs that we get from various customers on data source configurations. An overview. Data source is a location where data and application infrastructure of an enterprise is collected and stored in the cloud. ADOC UI uses this data source object to connect to the various databases and applications and run the crawler jobs, which would load the assets into ADOC, which would then be further used for profiling and running the data quality rules. Azure Microsoft SQL Server is a fully managed relational database service that provides the capabilities of SQL Server in the cloud. It is fully managed, scalable, and secure database service that allows you to create, deploy, and manage relational databases in the cloud. To add Microsoft SQL Server as a data source in ADOC, we must first create or use an existing data plane. Once SQL Server has been added as a data source, we will view the specifics of the assets from the SQL Server database under the ADOC's Data Reliability tab. Once we view the assets, then we would be able to run the profiling and assign the assets to data quality jobs, which would be then run as to understand the data reliability. What are the configuration prerequisites for Azure Microsoft SQL Server? One, we need to have an existing data plane which is up and running. This data plane is a bridge which acts as an interaction or which integrating the data integrating ADOC with Microsoft Azure SQL Server. The Azure SQL Server database could be running on any cloud environment or also natively. A Microsoft SQL user has to be created, which would be used in the cadence job execution. The database user should have the below privileges assigned to it: grant view database state, grant select on sys tables, grant select on sys schemas, grant select on sys indices, grant select on sys partitions, grant select on sys allocation units. Along with that, we also need to create a role called DB data reader and and add the user to that particular role. Then we add the select and view privileges on the database schema that we need to onboard on ADOC UI. Before we start configuring the resource on ADOC UI, we will need to get the details like JDBC URL, username, password, and also the database name that needs to be onboarded into ADOC from the database admin and the users. Let's quickly move on to the demo. This is the ADOC homepage. Let's go to the register tab. We'll click on the data planes to see if the data plane is available. For the course of this exercise, we'll be using a data plane called ADOC internal. We see that it is up and running. Go to data sources. Click on add data source. For SQL Server, we will be using the Azure MSSQL data source type. Provide any meaningful name. Provide any description for the user to understand what is the intention of creating this data source. So, the data reliability has to be enabled by default. Select the data plane that we need to provide that will be using for for running the crawler jobs. Click on next. For the database connectivity details, you would need to provide the JDBC URL, JDBC username, and JDBC password. Additionally, we can also use Azure Managed Identities and also Azure Service Principal to establish a connectivity from the ADOC UI onto the database. Uh, Based on the type of authentication mechanism we select, the details that we need to provide for configuration differs. So right now, let us go back and select a data source that has already been created by me for the course of this exercise. Let me edit the configuration. Click on next. To move to the next page, I will need to select on hit the test connection again. The connected message means that the provided details related to the connectivity and the username password is validated. Click on next. Here we would need to provide the database name that we need to onboard or load into ADOC. We might have observed in other databases that there's a drop down where the list of schemas and database would be listed. The UI functionality of SQL Server behaves a bit differently. Enable the torch query analysis if required. Enable schema drift monitoring and if required. Enable the job concurrency to see to set how many jobs can be run in parallel. You could also set and enable the crawler execution schedule. Please note if we have to make sure that the data plane always stays up and running while we run the while we schedule the crawler jobs. You could also set the notification for failure or success for failure or success of the data uh, of the crawler jobs. You could also set it to notify for failure and also for success. Click on submit. We could currently go to we could go to data sources directly, or we could start the crawler and go to data sources. Right now, I'll start the crawler and go to the data source tab. We see that the crawler is currently running. To see the logs for for the crawler job that we just started, go to the Kubernetes Data Observability plane under pods. You will see that a pod is created for the job execution for connecting to SQL Server database. Click on it. Click on the logs. From here, we can get the logs for for the crawler job runs. Any issues that we see in case of failures could be identified and captured from this particular logs. Alternatively, we can also log in into the terminal and use the K9S utility to generate the logs and then analyze the same. Please note that the pod that is created for any of these crawler executions is terminated after 15 minutes, because there's a cleanup process which runs every 15 minutes, which would basically clean up all the completed job executions. Let us go back to the register tab. I've already loaded this. Okay, we see that the crawler execution is completed a minute ago, right now while we were discussing. We could click on this arrow mark and see the list of objects that have been loaded. The database that we loaded actually just creates one table that just has one table that was created as part for this particular exercise. Click on the table tab. You would be redirected to Discover Assets tab. You can see the employees table that was created as part of this exercise. Click on the employees table. Under Overview, you could see there is no data reliability, data freshness, data anomaly, or any of the data quality scores. This is because as part of execution of the crawler job, data profiling or data quality analysis is like anomaly detection or freshness monitoring is not done. So we do not check the data quality as part of crawler job, and that has to be done. That has to be done independently after the assets are onboarded. Going back to the slides. What are the most common FAQs that we basically face from the customers as part of as part of onboarding SQL Server into ADOC? So, what roles are necessary for managed identity access to Azure MS SQL in ADOC? So, typically roles like for managed identity access, we would need roles like the SQL DB contributor, SQL Server contributor, uh, and but the exact role depends on the level of access that is needed from the Azure database side. Your Azure admins will be able to help you with this request. How do I configure Azure Managed Identity in ADOC for MS SQL? In ADOC and Azure MS SQL, as a data source, select the option to use Azure Managed Entity for authentication. Provide the relevant managed identity details like Azure Client ID and Azure Tenant ID for going ahead with the configuration. Can I use the next question that we usually get is, can I use the same managed identity for multiple Azure services in ADOC? Yes, from the Azure end, uh, user managed identity can be shared across multiple Azure services, and that also includes Azure MS SQL. And the other question is like, what should I do if my managed identity is not recognized? So you use managed identity while configuration, and then you see an error message while doing the test connection. So the way to troubleshoot this is ensure that the managed identity is correctly assigned to the database on the Azure portal, and all the necessary permissions that we discussed in the earlier slides are granted. The next question is regarding the logs. Um, back, where can you get the detailed log for troubleshooting Azure managed identity issues in ADA? So the logs for troubleshooting this identity issues could be got from the Kubernetes pod execution logs that we just discussed earlier in this video. Or you could also get the logs, connect to the Azure admins and get the logs from the Azure end, the Azure portal, which provides auditing and logging features, and which would help you to track the managed identity activities. And usually, we also face questions like, can we use this data source to connect to native, non-cloud, historic SQL Server database, on-prem SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server database? We might have noticed that currently there is no connector for Microsoft native SQL Server on-prem database. Yes, we could use the same Azure SQL Server connector, but only the native authentication uh, could be used. And what are the network and connectivity challenges that we usually encounter? In this particular approach, the connectivity, as part of the connectivity from ADOC UI uses data plane. So from the network and from the network side, we will have to make sure that the servers where the Kubernetes servers where the data plane is configured has access to has access to uh, the host and port of the the SQL Server database, be it running on cloud or be it run on prem. So we'll need to confirm that the connectivity is ensured by opening up the host and port between the various network or various servers. This is it from my end. We encourage you to share your questions with us on this topic via the comment sections on this video. If you don't get a response to your comments, please continue the conversation on discussion forums in Acceldata Network portal by starting the discussion. The link can be found below. Thank you. Have a great day.